The most critical component of any free society is voluntary action, but voluntary action alone does not ensure a free society. Voluntarism has been popularized by the concept that you own yourself. While the concept of self-ownership sounds interesting and even implies liberty in theory, the reality is the opposite. The society that we live in is one where human beings are being treated as mere commodities. Humanity has been stripped out of humans, and all that's left are mere subjects whose time, subservience, and labor are bought and sold in the marketplace. On a larger scale, the commodification of human beings has stripped the humanity out of society, leaving a landscape devoid of human qualities, and a people completely alienated from one another, a society where we live in invisible cages. The commodification and exploitation of human beings has always existed, but it was brought to a whole new level by Frederick Taylor in his book The Principles of Scientific Management. The fast food industry today epitomizes Taylor's legacy. Behind the counter, kitchens are geared so that the workers don't have to move or even think. Each person performs the same repetitive tasks endlessly like robots. The factory of yesteryear has been transformed into the high-rise and the cubicle of today. The factory foreman has been replaced by the suit and tie. Almost every job, including office work, has been reduced to monotonous tasks. Typing, printing, attending meetings, and generating reports that nobody reads. It's all the same. Every day these dungeons, dressed in fluorescent lights, phony smiles, and mundane tasks. We were told that the road to freedom and happiness involved going to college. With the exception of a few, nothing could be further from the truth. The average student debt today is over $37,000. And what type of return are most of those students getting back on their investment? The reality is, most of them are being prepared for life in the cubicle, not because of their own choosing, but because they have to pay back their massive debts that they were conned into accumulating. These people will be herded into sterile offices like animals because the private sector wants people who can push papers, write memos, and calculate profits and losses. The managers will impose work tempos, production quotas. You punch in, you punch out. Surf the internet, you'll stay late. You'll daydream about what life could have been. Because this isn't living, this is dying. While the government is usually blamed for limiting individual freedom, nothing attacks human liberty and sovereignty more than the workplace. A person can essentially buy you and extract your labor. Total obedience to your bosses is demanded at all times. You are told when to show up, when you can leave, and what you must do in the meantime. They watch over you, inspect you, spy on you. They punish, forbid, correct, assess, number, and abuse. You are told what to wear. You are trained how to talk, and you are forced to compete with other workers. And if you make a mistake or talk back, you could be scolded or disciplined as if you were an infant. This is the complete annihilation of human dignity, transforming people into prisoners. We used to get injured on the playground. Now we get occupational overuse syndrome, musculoskeletal disorders, repetitive strain injury, tendinitis, cervical radiculopathy, ulnar entrapment. We have problems with our eyes and our spines that even the best doctors can't figure out. The sedentary lifestyle is the new trend along with its legion of diseases, diabetes, high blood pressure, obesity. Performing the same tasks day after day, week after week, year after year is an assault on the human psyche. Nothing can be more detrimental to human growth, creativity, and personal progress than the tedium of the workplace. When a person carries out the same monotonous job day in and day out, the person is naturally drained of energy at the end of each day. And consider the average workday. 8 hours is spent sleeping, 8 hours is spent working, and once you factor in the time it takes to get ready for work, commute to and from work, eating time, grocery shopping, and other errands, we are only left with under 5 hours per day to ourselves. We actually live in a society that nurtures and maximizes stupidity and stunts human potentiality. Repetition is the chains which bind the vast majority, yet it is the liberator of the tiny minority. Instead of using technology to free humanity as it could be, these people have made us pawns on their chessboard. They have reduced us to nothing more than commodities. These people are almost the sole beneficiaries of our labor. Scientific management is the most ubiquitous religion of our time. It has saturated every institution that we interact with. Our schools, our workplace, the intelligentsia, the government, and even our lives are regimented with this insanity. We can see it all around us in the cars we drive, in the advertising we see, and in the government that doesn't work. and in the planet that we have polluted almost beyond recognition and damaged almost beyond repair. When something is this pervasive, we get entangled in its net. Every day is the same, a repetition with no end, dulling a person until they feel like they are living in a dark haze underwater. We were always told that if we worked hard enough, we could experience the American dream. What we weren't told is that the American dream is a giant sham. We were sold on the idea that the American dream is our dream, that it's something wonderful, that will benefit us all, and that we should all strive for, because it would make our society better and our world better. What we weren't told is that the American dream, in reality, is nothing more than a creed for vicious, avaricious, rapacious gluttons who have no one's interests in mind other than their own. For too long, our society has been fed propaganda which has not only celebrated but deified wealth inequality. For too long, the millionaires and billionaires of this world have wielded wildly disproportionate amounts of power over our political system. And this disproportionate power and influence is the reason why the senseless, obnoxious status quo has persisted for as long as it has. For too long, we have been living under an economic paradigm whereby human beings are seen as mere automata whose sole purpose is to serve the interests of the greedy and of the narcissistic and of the Machiavellian. And though somewhere deep down in our hearts we understand that we are being swindled out of the opportunity to live the life that we truly yearn for, a life of freedom, a life of liberty, a life of fulfillment, and most importantly of all, a life of true happiness, we continue to obediently acquiesce and tolerate the way we are being treated by these people who do not appear to have any regard for our well-being. Seldom, if ever, do we speak out in protest of the abuse we have been subjected to. Perhaps it is because they have succeeded in beguiling us into thinking that we are not being abused at all. Perhaps it is because we are paralyzed by fear of the vast consequences that await anyone who dares step out of line. For many, simply expressing how one truly feels can result in anything from losing his or her career to being excommunicated from his or her family members. Perhaps, in some cases, our silence is the result of succumbing to Stockholm Syndrome. Perhaps it is a combination of all these things. Perhaps then, it should not come as any surprise that it is entirely possible that such horrifying exploitation can take place on such a large scale without it being confronted by significant levels of protest, let alone experiencing any major interruptions. All this must change, and it must change now. No longer can we afford to accept the status quo. The ecology of this earth is dying, and we are dying along with it. The time that we had to passively accept the lies, the deceits, the shams, the manipulations, the propaganda, and ultimately the oppression of this consumerist economic system has run out. The time for thinking that the way things have always been is the way things must always continue to be has passed us by. The time has come for a game changer. The time has come for human beings to actually be treated as human beings, not as work droids. The time has come for a new system to be established to run alongside capitalism to offset the fundamental flaw of capitalism. The time has come for universal basic income.